From advanced civilization hidden far away and dirty secrets hidden far away from history, these are the 10 most shocking conspiracy theories ever shared on the Joe Rogan podcast. Let's get into it. Starting with number 1, unidentified drones. In the Joe Rogan podcast, episode 2244 with Ryan Graves, a former lieutenant in the US Navy, Joe Rogan talks about unidentified military drones. They talk about the potential threat that these drones pose. Now, what about these drones? For the past few years, strange drones have been showing up over US military bases, and no one really knows where they're coming from or what they're up to. It's confusing and a little unsettling. Listen to what he says here.
Essentially, right? So,
and they're not
working it, right? So either the government is holding back that secret from the direct resources within the government that are responsible for finding these systems, or they're not working the issue because there isn't an issue there to work.
He says it is either the government is hiding it from us or they are not working on it. According to the first sightings happening during the holiday season in 2022 and 2023 at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia.
Last year, the pilots that responded to that incident, I've spoken to them, they weren't able to lock these up with their infrared systems either.
People saw swarms of drones. I mean, up to 40 drones flying over sensitive spots. This was unusual.
At this point, I'm comfortable making a guess of probably over 800 or 1,000.
By 2024, more sightings came in, this time from military sites across New Jersey and Virginia. What's really worrying is how these drones seem to disappear from radar. Ryan Graves says that the infrared system is not able to pick these drones up, leaving everyone wondering who's behind them and what their goal is.
There are a number of reports from law enforcement that their infrared systems are not able to pick these objects up.
These aren't just regular drones. Experts say that they're more advanced, able to fly long distances and move in tight groups. Some think that it could be a form of spying, or maybe a new kind of surveillance tactic from another country. So far, no one knows where they're from or who's flying them, and the US government hasn't been able to figure out what's going on. Number 2, Ben Franklin's secret. This is the Joe Rogan Experience episode number 1852 with Sam Tripoli. Sam talks about the Benjamin Franklin secret that was found in his house in London, according to what was discovered in the 1998 renovation on Benjamin Franklin's home in London, which revealed an unbelievable 1,200 bone fragments from at least 15 people.
This old London house turned up 1,200 pieces of bone from at least 15 people.
And what is more shocking is that when the bone was tested, the time when this was done was found to be very similar to Franklin's days in England. Listen to what he says here.
Explanation is not mass murder, but an anatomy school run by Benjamin's young friend and protege, William Hewson.
The explanation to the bones buried at 36 Craven Street was that William Hewson, Franklin's friend, was a pioneering anatomist. At the time in the 18th century, the practice had not been legalized, so he did something crazy. He paid people, grave robbers, and executioners to secretly bring in the body to Franklin's basement where they conducted research on them, and to hide the evidence, he buried the bodies.
He was still in its infancy, but the day's social and ethical mores frowned upon it. A steady supply of human bodies was hard to come by legally, so Hewson, Hunter, and Field's other pioneers had to turn to grave robbing, either paying professional resurrection men to procure cadavers or digging them up themselves to get their hands on specimens.
Although it has been painted as though Franklin was not involved, it's quite clear that Franklin must have known about it.
Still, we can't imagine that, curious man that he was, he didn't sneak down and check out the proceedings at least once or twice. Of course he did.
Number 3, Atlantis' original location. In episode number 1928, Jimmy Crescetti proved that the lost city of Atlantis must have been washed off by a flood from its original location, where he showed to be the Sahara. He points to the Richat structure, also called the Eye of the Sahara, and he points out to an unbelievable fact by showing that it is very, very similar to what Plato described as Atlantis.
The lost ancient capital city of Atlantis. Plato had described Atlantis as being the capital. Let me just mention that because it was an empire said to be made up of 10 kingdoms, and what I'm focusing on is the lost capital city, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 3 of water, 2 of land, which matches the Richat structure.
The rings of land and the water there match his description of Atlantis' capital city. To the north, there are the Atlas Mountains, just like the ones that Pluto mentioned.
And furthermore, it was said to have mountains to the north, and you just so happen to have mountains called the Atlas mountain chain.
According to Crescetti, the Sahara long ago wasn't dry and empty like it is now. Around 5,000 years ago, it was green and full of life, with rivers and lakes flowing through it.
People don't realize is that Sahara Africa up until about 4,500 to 5,000 years ago was Totally green. It was tropical. It had the largest network, or one of the largest networks of rivers ever known to exist.
Ancient water systems like the Tamaracid River and Mega Lake Chad,
The largest freshwater lake ever known to exist, which is Mega Lake Chad.
show how different this place used to be. Imagine the Richat structure in the middle of all that, a thriving center surrounded by nature. Mauritania is known for its gold, which Plato also said Atlantis had plenty of.
Have an abundance of gold and that the outer walls were lined with it. And it turns out that Mauritania is loaded with gold.
The volcanic rocks in the area show signs of water damage, suggesting that there might have been a massive flood about 12,000 years ago at the end of the Younger Dryas period.
The ocean blasted through it far more
It's
recently.
a time when the world's weather suddenly shifted.
Well, that's not exactly how Plato worded it. He did describe that the aftermath of Atlantis followed a catastrophic event involving water.
Here's something interesting. The first king of Mauritania was named Atlas. That's the same name as the ruler of Atlantis in Plato's story. Could this point that Atlantis might have been originally located at the Sahara Desert? Who knows? Number 4, the moon landing. This is Joe Rogan Podcast episode number 1161 with Gerard Carmichael. In this episode, Rogan investigates the moon landing. Gerard said we didn't go to the moon.
Yeah, I don't really. I don't think we went to the moon.
People say that the moon landing was a setup, filmed, but how is it true? There's a lot of proof to this theory. And according to the pictures and videos NASA put out, don't look real. They look unusual. For example, Joe Rogan pointed out that the shadows in the image, why don't they match up? And then there's the flag. It looks like it's moving, but there's no wind on the moon, so that doesn't make sense. Then there is the press conference of the return from the moon. According to Joe Rogan, he says they look super depressed, they look super deceptive, they look fidgety, they say things that they refute later.
Conference. You ever watch the press conference when they returned from the moon?
No, wait. What's
Oh, you haven't
what's
seen
the
the
clue?
good stuff.
What's the clue in there? Or what's the
They
suspicious thing?
They look super depressed. They look super deceptive. They look fidgety.
Yeah.
And they're talking weird and they're saying shit that they refute later.
See this.
Watch this.
It was our pleasure to have participated in one great adventure. It's an adventure that took place not just in the month of July, but rather one that took place in the last decade. We all here and the people listening in today had the opportunity to share that adventure over its developing and unfolding in the past months and years. It's our privilege today to share with you some of the details of that final month of July.
One crazy thing was their movement. It seemed like there was a lot of bouncing, and some of the footage was literally just test videos that they put out.
There's a lot of weird shit with the video footage. There's a lot of footage where it looks like they're on wires, or they're like dangling from wires, and they bounce back up from their feet in this weird way. It looks like they're being yanked up from the ground. There's a video where it looks like they're on trampolines.
Look at the footage.
Just watch this.
Oh.
Like, how strange is this? See, look, he just lands. But doesn't, I mean, even the way he's moving, it's like he's being dangled. It's very strange.
Yeah.
You see him bouncing around.
Until today, no one has ever been able to go to the moon since 1969 through 1972. Doesn't add up, considering today's technology. In this podcast episode, it digs into Ross Ulbricht's case, talking about how he created Silk Road, a dark web marketplace that lets people buy illegal things like drugs.
Just running the website and allowing people a portal where they can do this and sell things.
Joe Rogan focuses on whether Ross really ordered any murders. He says that some people think he did, but there's no solid proof. The film about his story shows how a corrupt cop made up a murder to set up Ross. This fake murder was used as part of a case against him. He mentions that while Ross denies he ordered any hits, the truth is that the authorities twisted things to build a stronger case. Silk Road wasn't just another website, it changed the drug game. Before, the government mainly focused on street bus and stopping face-to-face deals, but Ross moved everything online, using services like DHL and USPS for shipping. This move took control away from the government, and they saw it as a big threat. It probably played a part in why Ross got 2 life sentences and 40 years in prison without parole, even though he had not killed anybody. But this is crazy considering that they were giving him a 10-year plea before, which he turned down. It was definitely a real mishandling of the case by the FBI. Ross was not charged with the murder, but he is serving 2 life sentences. It's really crazy. 6. The Amazon's Lost City. In this Joe Rogan episode number 2013 with Paul Rossley, where he points out that the Amazon forest was previously a big human civilization. According to Rossley, LiDAR scans have shown that there were once busy cities under all that greenery. Imagine standing where advanced communities once thrived.
The story's so fascinating because now we know through the use of LiDAR that there really were complex cities in the Amazon.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible that,
Only to realize the jungle completely overtook them. Researchers like to say now people near rivers grew Brazil nut trees and other crops on purpose, not by chance. There were proofs of ancient civilization, for example, a stone axe head found where there aren't any natural rocks.
Places, but it's always near the rivers. Like there's evidence of ancient civilizations. You want to hear the craziest thing? One of my guys found a stone axe head. Now here's the thing, the uncontacted don't have rocks. You won't find a rock on our river. There's clay. There are no rocks. They found a stone axe head in the jungle at a site from the uncontacted. But what that means is that the uncontacted tribe had a stone axe head that they've been holding on to since like Inca time.
It's more than an old tool. It's proof of a lost way of life. Who used it? Where did it come from? Artifacts like this show how much knowledge that we lost over time. The first expedition that went into the Amazon found people there, civilized people. But according to the next expedition, they said that they didn't see anyone at all. And the theory is that they killed everyone with diseases. Very unbelievable. Number 7, Hitler's death. This episode of the Joe Rogan podcast, the writer of Hunting Hitler, shares a theory that Adolf Hitler didn't die in his Berlin bunker in 1945.
Send more FBI agents to South America, to North Africa, go to the Canary Islands, go to Spain, trying to find out where this guy went.
But instead escaped to South America. This challenges the usual story of his suicide. DNA tests on the remains were thought to be Hitler.
Narrative, that's the story, that's all the eyewitness accounts that are even in the vicinity of collaborating with each other and corroborating each other's testimony. Like the closest version, because none of it seems to be very accurate, is that, okay, here's Hitler's skull, and when they did the genetic testing, it's that of a 35-year-old woman. So they're like, oh, well, this isn't Hitler.
Considering how chaotic things were in Berlin during the last days of the war in April of 1945, confirming his death is a lot harder than people think.
1945, April, in Berlin, you have the Allies coming in, wrecking shop, dropping bombs, blowing everything up they can in every single which way. You have the Russians coming in from the opposite direction. They don't even have enough guns to arm all their soldiers. So if they have 200 guys, or 200,000 guys, they have 100,000 guns. If the guy in front of you dies, you just pick up his gun. That's what's happening in April of 1945 in Berlin. So the noose is tightening. There is no, it is chaos, anarchy, pandemonium. This is hell on earth, is Berlin, 1945. So I don't know if you could get a real story.
Theory suggests that many Nazis, including Hitler, made it out through the rat lines to countries like Argentina and Chile. Eyewitness accounts from reliable sources also hint that Hitler might have made it to South America too.
So what you had in South America, both Chile and Argentina back-to-back had fascist regimes. You had Perón, who was part of the Nazi party starting all the way back into the mid-30s. He's the president of Argentina. So the Red Cross, they were there was about 3 different rat lines that guys were able to successfully get out of Europe into South America. And there's no question that we're talking thousands, if not tens of thousands of high-ranking Nazis made it there.
Tens of thousands?
Tens of thousands. And I'm not talking like little soldiers. I'm talking high-ranking Nazis.
In the 3rd season of Hunting Hitler, the investigators followed the trails of other Nazis like Eichmann and Mengele.
Guys like Joseph Mengele and Adolf Eichmann. These are the most disgusting, despicable humans to exist at the time. If Hitler is dead, Joseph Mengele is the guy that would take syringes full of blue ink and inject them. You have blue eyes, Joe, or you have brown eyes.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can make them blue.
Oh, wow.
And then take twins and start torturing them to see if one would feel the pain. That's Joseph Mengele. That's the guy that then in South America was helping high-ranking Argentinians have abortions, and he set up, it was a torture camp that was started by Joseph Schaefer, a Nazi. And Joseph Mengele, the doctor of death, that escaped and made it at the behest of Perón into Argentina, he set up the hospital at Colonia Dignidad, which was another safe haven for more
Nazis in South America.
who were found to have lived in South America long after the war ended. Their discoveries support the theory of Hitler's escape. The writer points out that the real story of Hitler's death hasn't been fully told, and it's possible that the Cold War played a part in covering up. Both the US and Russia had reasons to quickly end the Nazi chapter. Number 8. JFK assassination. In the next episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, it was about John F. Kennedy's assassination. According to Joe Rogan, Lee Harvey Oswald didn't act alone in the JFK assassination. Instead, he was part of a bigger plan.
My belief, and this changes over time, I think that Lee Harvey Oswald was in on it. I think he was a part of it, but I think there were multiple people that were in on it. That's what I believe.
Do you think there are multiple shooters?
Yes.
And there are a lot of proofs to it, but the strongest yet is the single bullet theory.
One of the reasons why I believe that is because of the formation of the single bullet theory. And the single bullet theory was formed because the fact that they had to account for one bullet that hit the underpass, ricocheted off, and put some man in the hospital.
The bullet that was found on Connolly's gurney looked way too clean after supposedly going through both Kennedy and Connolly. It says that bullets should get damaged when they hit bone, but this one didn't, which doesn't make sense.
They found that bullet on Connolly's gurney when they brought him into the hospital. It's too convenient, and the bullet itself is fairly pristine. Now, knowing as much as I know about bullets from personal experience of hunting, you can't hit anything with a bullet. I pulled a lot of bullets out of animals. When you shoot an animal and you hit bone, those bullets, they distort brutally. I mean, they don't look like that after they go through two people and hit all sorts of bone.
See the bullet.
Or Connolly's gurney, excuse me. And that's the bullet that they're attributing to this single bullet theory.
Another clear fact is that there was an active effort to cover the evidence. For example, the autopsy reports. Initially, doctors in Dallas said Kennedy's neck wound was from a bullet, but later, doctors in Maryland said it was a tracheostomy wound.
He found that there was a difference in the autopsy report at Bethesda, Maryland, the Bethesda Naval Hospital, versus what they had reported on the scene in Dallas.
Finally, while writers think Oswald was part of a bigger conspiracy, they aren't sure about the second shooter theory. Some people said they heard shots from both the front and behind, but that could just be because of all the noise and confusion. It's hard to know where the shots actually came from. Number 9. CIA's secret technology. This episode of the Joe Rogan Podcast, episode number 1327, shows digs into the military and government operations that have been mostly kept in the dark. With Mike Baker, a former CIA agent, it's not about sharing classified details, but more about looking at units, events, and new tech, changing the way that battles are fought. For example, some tech can help locate targets in complete darkness by reading biodata or heart rates.
By their heartbeat.
Yeah,
It
helps if you have other data points, right?
Mike points out that tech like exoskeletons and soldier gear designed to make troops faster and more effective. Some people call it the universal soldier.
This is all part of.
These tools aren't just about increasing power, they also focus on health, safety, and making soldiers work smarter. But not everything gets rolled out. Some of these innovations get put on hold, mostly to avoid giving away too much or because they're not practical. Because it's interesting how many of these changes happen because of cooperation between the military and private businesses. Companies and universities help create new tools that sometimes end up being used outside the military, like Elon Musk's Neuralink. How much of this military tech ends up being useful in everyday life. And at number 10, we have MK Ultra. This Joe Rogan episode with Tom O'Neill exposes one of the CIA's dirtiest secrets. In episode 1459, the MK Ultra program. The MK Ultra program was a secret CIA project aimed at exploring mind control and is tied to an unsettling theory. Imagine the idea of a Manchurian candidate, someone who's brainwashed into doing awful things like murder without even knowing it, without hesitation, and maybe without even remembering.
Their main objective was to create what they called hypno-programmed assassins, people who would kill on command, popularly known as Manchurian candidates, after a book that was written in 1962 and later became a movie and then a movie again.
According to Tom, MK Ultra started in the late 1940s and became more official by 1952. The CIA wanted to see how drugs and hypnosis could be used to control people's actions. Their goal? To create people who would kill without any memory or feeling.
The objective was to get people to go and commit an act of murder against their moral code and have no memory of their programming and be amnesic even of the act after the fact often. That was their main goal.
Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the man in charge of MK Ultra, and other CIA officials ran these experiments.
And Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who was kind of the mad scientist who had supervised they had safe houses in San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, where they would experiment on people that were lured into these apartments and houses that were either look like brothels or hippie communes or whatever.
They didn't hesitate to use LSD, sensory deprivation, and other mind-bending methods. The goal was to break people down and reprogram them. This is where Manson's story starts to make you think Manson is famous for the murders he caused, but could his twisted actions have been influenced by mind control techniques like those used in MKUltra? The link isn't as strange as it might sound. Dr. Jolly West, a psychiatrist who worked with both MKUltra and Manson, might have been a key player.
A scientist named Jolly West, Louis J. West, who was, when the hearings occurred in the 70s, identified as a top MKUltra researcher. He was an academic. I learned that West had been at the same place that Manson was in the Haight in the summer that Manson became exactly what the CIA was trying to create.
It must have been that West used LSD and other drugs to alter memory and control behavior, which makes Manson's behavior a lot less random. According to Tom, when he got the federal parole files of Manson, he had this sort of immunity for 2 years while committing these murder crimes, and he also violated his parole, and there was no repercussions, like they were trying to cover up something. So there you have it, with the conspiracy theories in the Joe Rogan podcast. Tell us what you think in the comments section, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more of this.